Oh, yeah. That's scummy. Yeah, it's just scumbag. Hey, how we doing today? I want to say, and I kind of mean it, it's good to see all of you. Speaking of that, I totally forgot to point something out. Because I was so, this map is just so incredible. And this word, I mean, I just can't get over this. I didn't even point out this picture. That is supposed to be a slave ship. And these are slaves, enslaved people brought over the Middle Passage. They got little suits. They just got a little family together like it's a little cruise. That's nothing at all like it was. It sounds like it looks like a pleasure cruise, how Negroes lived under slavery. It's mind-boggling, that revision of history. Speaking of revision of history, what was it called? What was it called where the South basically reinvented the reason for the Civil War? What was that called? Came up, it wasn't about slavery. What was that called? Yeah, the Lost Cause. And what became the symbol of the Lost Cause and states' rights and Jim Crow? The Confederate battle flag. And, oh, what were the laws that segregated the South again? Jim Crow laws. What is it called? Where it said you had to pass a literacy test? Yeah, grandfather's law. And, oh, and the Reconstruction myth. They said it was not about establishing equal rights and bringing the South back in the Union. It was really a what? Yeah, Northern invasion, Northern aggression. And what was the book and then movie that would become kind of personify this myth? There's two of them. Which movie led to the Klan?
Birth of the Nation.
Yeah, Birth of the Nation. Which movie would become kind of the myth of the beauty of I know it. I heard it. And because I was thinking Gone with the Wind. So I'll just answer. That's what I had in my head. That's why I changed it. And lastly, what did they start building all over the South to enforce Jim Crow and the Lost Cause? Yeah, monuments all over. All these monuments. And that's why monuments are going to become so controversial, because they were built for this lost cause. And so many teachers would be taught this. I still can't get over that's 2012. So did we get the sundown towns?
Yep.
All right. So let's move on then to the West. The West in the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age would be the term of the post-Civil War, and I'll explain how that happened. And when we think in the United States of the West, because of popular culture, books, radio shows, movies, and then the first television shows, the most popular ones were about the West. And the West is really this area in blue, those last states. The last areas that the United States would conquer from American Indians. And this area would also be called the Great Plains. And that area, kind of the green blob, is the plains. Okay, it's really hard to say what the plains are, per se, but we know what they are not. They're not areas where there are mountains, and there's not areas where it rains. Helena's kind of right in the middle of this, because we got mountains around us, but we are not in the mountains. Basically, right here is the rain line. Approximately there, every place west of that line, it rains less than 20 inches. So basically, it's an area where it's hard to grow a crop without irrigation. And your yields are low. And so that is the area that people going west on the Oregon Trail or whatever would get over as quick as possible and get to California. And therefore would be the last area conquered by the United States. So that would be the West, even though obviously it's much more complex than that. So the Plains Indians who lived there, the last remaining resistance to the expansion of the United States, by definition, are nomadic, because there's not enough rain to sit in one small place. They have to be small. They control their populations because they can't have too many people. Unlike the vast majority of tribes east of the rain line and also on the West Coast, they couldn't have permanent villages, cities, empires. They couldn't have crops. They weren't as agricultural. They might grow, the Plains Indians, for example, the Cheyenne would grow crops along like the Platte River, and then, or help cultivate in the spring, move into this area here, following the bison herds, and then come back and cultivate what was there in the fall. But they couldn't be in one spot. The only time a plains tribe would be in one spot in the winter. They would hunker down in one spot and wait it out. If winter's on the plains, pleasant. And so hunker down in one spot. And they would rely upon the bison. I say buffalo all the time. I can't help it. But buffalo are an Asiatic or African animal. Bison are the Americans. But if you say it, that's fine. But I really try to make myself say bison. And these are the bison. By 1850, because of partially hated by the ravages of disease to the tribes, there were between 50 and 60 million bison on the Great Plains. So these herds were huge. And they would, you can imagine, almost become wholly instrumental to these plains culture. In fact, the bison and plains Indians became synonymous. And then when the horse arrived with the Spanish in the 15 and 1600s, another way to look at it is the horse returned to the Americas. With the Spanish, these plains tribes took to the horse like you can't imagine. We already mentioned the Comanche, but also the Kiowa. And then we're getting closer to Montana, the mighty Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and then of course the Lakota Sioux. They took to the horse. They would become one with the horse, allow for more mobility, change hunting forever. And the diseases, remember the diseases that destroy over 90% of the population in the East, same thing in the West? They hammered the Plains Indians because there's not as many. They weren't permanent. It did not hit them to the same effect. So like, yeah, smallpox would devastate the Mandan tribe in the 1820s here, what's now North Dakota, and would devastate the Lakota and the Dakota Sioux here. It just didn't have the same effect. Let's be clear, it was still incredibly deadly, but not quite what it was in the East. So these Plains tribes were there, and that is a painting from the 1840s. These are Cheyenne, it's probably Kansas, hunting down all the bison, and the Oregon Trail would change everything. And it's not so much that they were coming into this land and staying in the plains, but they were going through the Oregon Trail to get to California, where disease and war would devastate the tribes here. And they would disrupt the bison herd, and there would be some attacks on the Oregon Trail, and that would lead directly to the Fort Laramie Treaty, the only U.S. fort in the northern Great Plains up until the 1860s was right here, Fort Laramie in Wyoming. No, it's not near Laramie, Wyoming. It's a national park now. But probably the biggest gathering of tribes in the Great Plains would happen for this treaty. And basically the deal was this. The tribes would keep their land in the plains, how they would fight it out however they would, but they would keep the land. Just let the migrants go through on the Oregon Trail. That was the agreement. And for about 13 years, the United States, this might shock you, kept the treaty. Remember the Northwest, Tippecanoe, Tecumseh, remember that? They broke all the treaties. Well, for the most part, they kind of kept it. And then what would change? It would start with mining. And that would be the first major incursion of the U.S. into the plains where they stay. And I know we're not, the mines aren't necessarily in the plains, but the transportation routes, but also to hunt for food, mining. Now, this is a survey level class in American history, so we have to cover a lot. We can't go into great detail. This is something unfortunate because Montana history has such a great connection to mining. The first boom towns would happen in Nevada and other places. There would be placer mining. There would be a significant number of Chinese immigrants, all men, would do this. And then hard rock mining, the actual tunneling. Here's a sluice in Montana for a hard rock mine. This is a hydraulic mine in Montana. These would all be used. But now you have miners. And the big thing is they would come in, these massive booms. Oh, these are all the gold mines in western Montana. This is a Google map done about 10 years ago. But I thought this was just fascinating. All those gold specks. That just gives you the idea of the extent of the gold mines. Most of them now are abandoned and doing what happens a lot with business in the United States. They're just leaking ruin and poison and arsenic into our water because they just left ruin. Have you been to Butte? That's the thing, abused. Okay, so gold and silver were the first mines. Remember, the United States still was backing their money, their specie with gold, or their currency with gold. There was a little break for 10 years in the Civil War with the greenbacks, then went back. We're coming to what's called the gold standard. Silver was worth anywhere from 1/50th to 1/20th of gold, but this was a storage of value, of wealth. But wherever there's silver, there's copper and lead. Wherever there's silver. So, for example, they found a great strike of silver in Butte. Well, silver prices dropped like a rock in 1890. There was copper. And the second industrial revolution had just begun. Electricity, copper. I don't know why that fascinates me so much, but wherever there's silver, there's copper. You drive to Butte and look at some of the hills along the way, like near Basin and a few of those places. You look on the side of these ridges, and there's these big kind of gray splotches. That's silver and copper. It's pretty low grade ore, but it's all there. And Comstock lode in Nevada would be a massive strike in the early 1860s. The first really big one since California a decade earlier. And that's how enough people got to be in Nevada to make it a quick stay for Republicans in the 1864 election. But then Colorado would be the next big strike. And there's already a small little kind of an agricultural little town called Denver, and that would boom because it would be the commercial center. That's making Denver today. And then what state would have the next really big gold strike? I'm sorry, what territory? Well, first it was Dakota and or Nebraska territory, then Washington territory, then Montana territory. Montana, Bannock, Virginia City. Has anyone ever been to Bannock or Virginia City? Both of them? Bannock's really cool. Bannock's great. I would highly recommend it. It's really Bannock, the first, is also the first territorial capital, then would be moved north, but Montana, all during the Civil War. And the point is, all these people who are going there need food. And it's basically it's very difficult to transport goods across the plains in wagons. So they got to send hunters out to kill the ones. And that is a major incursion onto American Indian land that is their land on the plains because of the Fort Laramie Treaty. And so this coincides at the exact same time as the Transcontinental Railroad.